Worldwide. I'm your host, Anthony Castro, and we have with us today my friend Richard Kong. How you doing today, Richard?
Yeah, great. Yeah, I'm doing well. Thanks for asking.
Richard, we actually have a little bit of a history as we both went to the University of Maryland, and we were even in the same kind of student-run startup incubator there called Startup Shell. Richard started a company called Gravity, then he went on to work at Scale. Now you're doing a new company called ShineWith, but I was hoping you could start off just by giving us the story of Gravity, how that got started, and how it grew.
Yeah, so I first started Gravity, I think, roughly the winter of maybe 2015, winter of 2014, early 2015. And like at the time, it was roughly like when I was trying to do my SATs and being someone who has like grown up like a fair bit in China, I had like really poor grammar and reading skills. And so I thought, hey, like, what's the best way to like really practice like how to get better in English? And the thing that I came up with was, hey, like, why not translate these like Chinese novels into English? And so that's where like this whole idea even like got started from. And then from there, so I was like, hey, so now I've like translated roughly like 10,000 words. I don't really want that to go to waste. Like, why don't I publish them online? And it got picked up by Reddit. And then from there, it's just like grown really quickly. So it grew, I think, like probably like it's like 10,000 users daily by the start of my senior year. And that's when I guess like I thought like, hey, like this, yeah, high school. Yeah, and like this was when I thought, hey, like this could probably be a business. And so I like started thinking a bit more about like, hey, how can I grow this? Hey, how can I like really push things forward? Which meant like bringing on other translators, editors, setting up a whole system for that. And yeah, I just like kept on growing. Like every month we'd have maybe like 10, 15, 20% growth in terms of users. And in the summer of my freshman year in college, like this would be summer of 2017, I sold the company to this, I guess, like the publishing arm of Tencent, which is called China Literature, which then itself went on to IPO roughly, I think, 2 months after they acquired me. So yeah, and then I guess like a bit of, I guess like the end of my story is I stayed on with the parent company for about 2 years, 2.5 years. I worked primarily, I guess, like keeping Gravity running, but then I also helped them, I guess, like expand internationally.
So, I mean, I feel like that's a pretty big story told in a very succinct way. Probably because it already feels like old hat to you since it happened a while ago. But I was wondering maybe if we could start by digging into like early days at Gravity. What was like that very first version of the product, and how did it come to be picked up by Reddit and start getting attention?
Yeah. So I think I was really lucky in the fact that I went to like a STEM-based high school. So I knew a lot about coding, and I knew a lot about, hey, like what it takes to like set up a website on the internet. Although I think the first version of the website was basically just like this like WordPress.com website that I like basically spun up in like 5 minutes. And then, yeah, so I guess early days. So we first started getting traction, I think about like a week after I started posting my, I guess, translations. I think it got picked up through Reddit because I was actually translating something someone else had already translated before. And I guess like he had stopped at some point, although he had amassed like some like decent sized audience. And then I guess like all that audience went over to me because I was soon like surpassing him in my, I guess, like total length of translations. And so early on, for me, it was much more of a hobby. I still very distinctly remember the day I turned on donations because that was what, like, I think maybe 2-3 months after I was like doing this. I had been doing like roughly maybe 2-3 hours a day. So it was like pretty committed because of like the traffic that I saw, but I never thought of this as like, hey, I can actually make money off of this. And so I think this was like sometime in, I want to say March when I turned on the donations for the first time. Like that first day, I got like $327, and that was when I realized, hey, wow, like this could actually like, be making money. This could actually be something bigger than just a hobby. And so I think that's when I started like shifting gears a little bit and like putting in a lot more time to it. Really like digging deep into like translating as much as I could, and doing that. And I think most of the early days was basically just me translating, me publishing, me responding to comments, editing. Everything was done by me. And like I think it was just like really down in the weeds. And then slowly when I realized, hey, like this could be a business, I started like thinking about, hey, like what if we could bring on other translators? What about some other novels that we could start doing and whatnot? And like slowly that I guess like system got built.
So was it always monetized just through donations, or did you eventually have like a business model around it?
Yeah. So I think even to the point where I left, I think we still didn't really fully flesh out like a correct business model. So early days, like I think this was like pre 2016 was sorry it's like pretty much all of 2015, and then some part of 2016, that was pretty much all donations. And so at this point, I think donations provided a really clear outlet for I guess like direct contribution. So the way we set it up was I would do roughly 3 to 5 chapters a week. So that would be like roughly anywhere from 6 to 10 to 12,000 words per week. And then if I got like, say like $80 in donations, I would do an extra chapter that week. So that might be like the 6th chapter, the 7th, 8th, 9th, and then so on. And so it really became like, hey, like every chapter after the 3rd one each week was basically me making money. And so that was the model that we had for like quite a while. And then we realized like we had a lot of traffic, and the way we thought about like monetizing that traffic was through ads. And so we started off with like a very like bare bones like AdSense, and then we I guess like moved on towards like talking with other I guess they're called ad publishers, who are basically the middlemen between people who want to run campaigns and like people who I guess like have a lot of audience like us. And so we started working a lot more with them until I think roughly like I think 2020 end of 2016, where we basically handed all of our I guess like ad inventory to this middle agent who's called Monetize More. They basically handled all the ads for us, and like for most of our life we were using CPM based ads. And so with the amount of traffic that we were getting, so we were getting roughly like 2.5 to 3 million page views a day at our peak. And so like at, let's say like a $1 CPM, which is like our goal, that would be like $2,500 to $3,000 a day, and just in terms of ad revenue. And then from there on out, we still kept the donation piece, but then we realized like it was becoming a smaller and smaller chunk of what we I guess like had hoped it would be. And so I think it was like this started like right before the acquisition, and like grew really quickly afterwards. And so like this was our like channel where we started working on a more subscription based model, where we would basically be like, hey, like if you want to read ahead, pay us $5 a month and you can read maybe 5-10 chapters ahead. And I think that was the start of something that I think could have been a really strong business model. And so like that grew really, really quickly. I think it went from like $1K a month to like maybe almost probably a near $100K a month by the time I left. I think that was probably the right way to like move down this, I guess, like overall path.
The very early business model when it was just donations and you were releasing extra chapters if there were donations sounds so similar to like what Patreon is today. But you were doing it kind of in an ad hoc way on your own.
Yeah. It's like more like a one-time donations, and like it would be like a one-time thing. And like I think the piece missing there was like although they would donate, right, like they wouldn't really it's like the donators wouldn't really receive the benefits, like, or like they would, but like it would be basically for the good of the like readers. And they like part of that was really good, but then the other part meant like there were some people that like wanted to donate, but then they were like, but I also want something for myself, like something special. And like I think that's actually what brought on the like discovery of like, hey, like why don't we start a Patreon where we start to like give only the donors extra chapters, because I think a couple people had like talked to us and been like, hey, I want like some extra perks if I do this or that.
So you did end up starting an actual Patreon?
Yeah. So I think at some point we were probably like the community as a whole, we were probably one of the bigger blobs on Patreon. I think between like the whole, I guess, like transition based community, we're probably pulling down 250 to about 300, maybe even 400K a month.
Wow, just from Patreon.
Yeah. So it was quite a bit.
At what point did you decide to start bringing on other translators? And what was that transition like?
Yeah, so I think very early on, so I guess like when I started translating, I always, I guess, like received these like, hey, like I'm happy to help. I know English. I want to be a editor, or I know a bit of Chinese. I want to try to be a translator. But I think given that like my original like purpose, so I guess like starting Gravity was so that I would personally translate and like personally get better at English, which by the way I did. I think I got like a 790 on the SAT writing portion, which is now discontinued. But it was like I think it jumped from 600 to about 790, so I was pretty happy about that.
Yeah, that's a great result.
Yeah, thanks. And then so when I first thought about, hey, like what could be the next step here, I think this was like slightly after donations. I thought, hey, like maybe we can start to bring on other people to do translating. I would be the like QC quality checker, and then that way we can increase our throughput. And the process started pretty organically, where I was responding back to people who expressed interest. And I told them, hey, like, yeah, like, why don't you start doing this chapter? And then I'll read over it. If it looks good, we'll publish it together. And I think the process has come a long way since then, where we have like or like at least at the time when I left, we had a like dedicated system of translators. They would maintain a glossary. There'd be like a separate system of editors who had like a main novel and a sub novel, where like their main novel was something that they would be like on call for almost. And it just became a very like tight knit system. Whereas at the very start, it was basically just me telling this guy, hey, do this chapter. I'll look over it. If it looks good, we'll publish. And that was it.
Were there ever issues around like IP with the novels that you were translating?
Yeah, so I think that was also like a part of why I ultimately sold. So I think at the very start, nobody knew, I guess, like how big this could be, or also like where this could lead to. And so back in the day, like the authors mostly had like they retained the IP with regards to translations, and so we could just like talk to the author, be like, hey, I want to do this, and they'd be like, yeah, there's no problem from my end. But later on, as like the industry, I guess, like of translations grew, as well as the fact that web publishing in China itself grew as well. I guess publishers started to have like more and more strict, I guess, like rules and like thoughts around IP. And so this was like roughly the summer of my freshman year, where I was thinking, hey, maybe like spring, when I started like really engaging a lot with the publishers. And I think I had like a epiphany at some point, where I was like, hey, so we can really only license from one company if we want to make it big. And the reason for that was because like if we had, let's say, license from this first company, the chances of us licensing from this like different company would be so much worse, to the point where it became these Chinese publishing companies actually like started to create their own clones of like what we were doing, and like it didn't really make sense for them to give us licenses if they were doing something themselves, or even if they had, I guess, like a partner in the USA already. And so that really got me thinking about, hey, like what kind of future do I envision for myself, as well as Gravity, as well as what do I want to do, let's say like 2-3 years from now, if not longer. And the answer to that was, I really don't want to be somebody who's, I guess, like spending a lot of time trying to figure out like the dollars and cents of like how to like license each novel. And so at that point, like there were really like 2 or 3 possible paths in front of me. If I wanted to keep going with Gravity, I think we would have had to like made a major pivot and moved on towards original novels, which at the time seemed like a really risky bet. And honestly, like thinking back now, it might have been the right decision, but at the time it was really murky about like whether or not this would be the right decision. The other path would be to like basically stay independent and just hope that these like licenses would come through whenever we needed them. And so like this would be like very limiting to our growth. And then I guess like the final path was to either take investment or be bought on entirely. And so I chose like that final path where I was like bought out by the biggest publisher in China, which meant that basically we had free reign over, or like we had, I guess, overall like unlimited access to like the novels, and then we could grow from there.
Why was it that having a license with one publisher would have made it harder to license with other publishers?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest pieces was that once we started getting the licenses, other companies would then like ask us like, hey, like, do you have licenses for these books? And we would be like either yes, or like we're still in the middle of like talking through them. And then when I guess like we got these like licenses from this company called Zhongheng, afterwards, like it made our talks with this other company called 17K much harder. And I think the thesis behind that was like, hey, like these people seem like they want to like branch more in terms of Zhongheng, and like it doesn't make sense for us to give them these licenses at the moment if that can be like, say, like used against us, right? So like if we like look at these novels individually, they have like their own base of community and whatnot. But the thing was that like while the translation was still ongoing, this, I guess, like group of readers would still stay intact. But the moment like this novel finished, or like say like this novel stopped translating, this group of readers would start to slowly dwindle. And so for these like publishing companies, if they wanted to, I guess, like maintain, I guess, like their edge or like lead, it really made a lot of sense for them to, I guess, even like withhold the licenses and then give it to a partner which they controlled or held, and then have them do the translations, basically taking over all of the audience that the previous translator had built.
So it sounds like they were kind of worried about the novels being on the same platform, like competing for eyeballs there.
I think it was, like definitely a big part of that, but I think the bigger part was like they just wanted to have their own like US based partner where like they could, I guess, like extract all the profits there.
Gotcha. So after the initial traction, did it just continue to grow organically, or were there moves you made in order to help it grow faster?
Yeah, so I think the part that I'm the most proud of is, I guess, like how we grew. We didn't really spend anything on ads. We had a lot of referral based and word of mouth based traffic, but the biggest one was probably just like the acquisition of new novels. So I think I guess like the overall translation community was quite small, And so what happened was like each translator would have his or her own book. And so I guess like the point that I guess like made Gravity from a I guess like hobby to a real business was when I realized like, hey, we can also bring on other translators, and then B, I realized that when we brought on other translators, we could also bring on their books. And so that really, I guess, like changed the mindset around how can we get more throughput to how can we get more audience. And so basically we worked with a lot of like smaller translators to join our platform because on our platform they could access more readers, B also I guess like get ad revenue, which was quite hard to set up on your own with this smaller audience and whatnot. And so I think at the end it was like a win-win situation, but at the very start, like it was quite muddy and like how we should move forward and grow.
So you're kind of paying royalties out to the translators and I guess to the publishers as well?
Exactly, yeah.
And then, so I'm thinking probably when you first started translating, you had no idea about partnering with publishers and things. At what point did it transition from just kind of basically pirating novels and putting them online to like official partnerships? And was that like a smooth transition, or did they come at you like with fangs bared and you had to calm them down, or what was that conversation like?
Yeah, so I think the start of that was happened probably about a year after I started it. So I think this was probably like start of 2016 where we were thinking like, hey, like so now we're making what like I think the time was maybe like 10-15K a month in terms of like overall revenue across donations, across ads, and also across all the different novels. And seeing that, we thought, hey, like this is actually quite a bit of money, so like we should really think about like, hey, like should we reach out to the authors, should we reach out to the publishers? I think that was an ongoing theme for a really long time, where it was kind of like a catch-22, where I guess like the more we reach out to the publishers and like the more we I guess like engage with them, the more likely that they were actually not going to give us the licenses, because that meant like if they saw the potential, they would just do it themselves. And so I think that was a really weird dynamic there, although I think we started reaching out to authors quite early, in fact. And like overall, they were really supportive overall, since like we were making peanuts and they got a bigger audience, which is always what they would want. And so I guess like the process of licensing, I think some publishers were definitely more willing to work with us than others. And like I'll go back to the example of Zongheng. I think they were our I guess like first partners really, and like they were probably the most willing to give us the like licenses, because at the time they had no plans to like go international. On the other hand, I guess, so like this is my parent company, they actually wanted to go like international and break into the English reading audience. And so they were definitely a lot more, I guess, cagey when they thought about licensing their own novels to a third party.
And how was the decision to like drop out of college and commit to Gravity full time?
Yeah. So I guess like I've probably been a really bad student since I started Gravity. And I think a large part of that was just because like I realized, hey, like there's something bigger and better than grades out there. And one of the first things that I thought about like once I sold the company was, okay, I still have 3 more years of college. Like how am I going to get through this? And so right after selling it, I actually stayed a year in college while running Gravity full time and like working with my Chinese counterparts. And so every summer, every winter, I would fly back to China and like stay there for maybe like a month, 2 months, and just work there. And so the part that I guess like uh, made me realize that this wasn't sustainable was, I think, by the end of my sophomore year, where I realized, hey, like I'm constantly really tired, constantly feeling like really shitty, and this was probably because like I was working like a lot. So like I think starting from probably like high school when I started Gravity, I was probably working maybe like doing school and then putting anywhere from 20 to 40 to even like 45 hours a week on Gravity. And so like this meant that like my weekends were basically just like translating, talking to people, editing, whatnot. And it was really a lot less about, I guess, like doing things that you would do in college, such as like join clubs or otherwise. And so at the end of sophomore year, I realized that like something needed to change. And the easiest change for me was to simply say, hey, like I'm going to stop taking classes next semester. I'm going to try this thing full time and let's see where it goes. And so I guess like soon afterwards, I realized, hey, like maybe this isn't the lifestyle that I want. I want to see like what else is out there for me. And so roughly a semester after I dropped out, I realized, hey, like let me get back in. And so this was roughly around the same time that I basically left Gravity. So I left Gravity, rejoined school, and then that brings me here. Well, not here, but like that was, I guess, like the whole like thought process there.
How did the acquisition come to be? Who reached out to who, and what was that whole process like?
Yeah, so because of licensing, I had already been in talks with all of the major publishing companies in China. So like Zhangyue, 17K, Zhongheng, Jidian, and also a couple of like smaller niche ones as well. And so really when the thought of investment came to my mind, like I approached it with like the other, I guess, like parties that I was working with. And so at the end we realized like, hey, like there could be something there. And so I think it was more of a conversation between both of us, since we had already a dialogue, and we just, I guess, like naturally transitioned it towards, hey, you want to license from us? Well, do you think we could take like a stake in your company? And from there it went to, hey, like should we just buy your company all out?
How long was that conversation from like, hey, let's license, to let's invest, to let's buy you, to sold?
Good question. Probably 3 to 4 months. It's been a while since so I don't remember the exact time frame. I think the starting point when like things got to be serious was probably around March, and then the time was roughly June, maybe like the start of July.
Are you allowed to say how much that sale was for?
Yeah. So I mean, so roughly all in, I got about $2 million.
Nice. By that point, it'd been 3 years, I guess, or 2 years.
Yeah, about 3 years. Yeah.
And started in high school. 3 years later, sold for $2 million. Pretty crazy. Not a lot of people have that experience, especially like at any point in their life, especially that young. Like what a way to kind of ignite the beginning of your career, I guess.
Thanks.
So after you sold, what was it like working with them as like a subsidiary? What was that relationship like?
I think one of the things that like I think both is a good and bad thing was because of how young I was. I didn't really think of it as a subsidiary, and I think most of the team members of the parent company also didn't think of that relationship either. And so it was more like a mentor-mentee thing, where I would talk with them, get advice from them, learn their stories about when they were trying to expand the Chinese market, and then try to apply those tactics to the US market. And so I think overall, like that time period, we had probably the most fun, and also I guess like the most like disappointments in a sense, because a lot of the things that they did in China just simply didn't translate to what the US market wanted or even expected.
Do you have an example of that?
And so
do you have an example of like something that worked well in the Chinese publishing market but just like didn't in the US market?
Yeah, so I think probably the most prominent example is like a paywall. And so basically, like our readers had been expecting things for free and didn't really want, I guess, like pay to read. Whereas in China, like this was the default. Although I guess like now there is like a shifting tide towards going back to free and then like seeing where else you can draw the money from, which is mainly based off of IP. So like selling the movie rights, selling the like I guess like TV rights, whatnot. And so at the time, right, like the thought process was, this has worked so well in China. This has like really built a whole economy of writers in China. Hopefully, and like I think it will work in the US. And the result actually was more that like people were really against it. And although it's still being done today in the US, I think the results are probably like a much more of a mixed bag than like one would hope.
I feel like that came a lot from the transition to free to paid, because like you look at Kindle, everything is paywalled, right? You have to buy the book in the first place.
Yeah.
Maybe because it comes in a handheld form factor, it feels more like buying a book. But that seems...
Yeah, I think the other part of this was like more like pirating and whatnot. And so like in China, right, like if you hosted a site that was pirating content, like this was like punishable by law. Whereas I think more internationally, this became quite common, right? So like if you think about manga, right, like pretty much like almost every single manga site that you would read from is like to some degree a pirater or aggregator. They don't translate their content themselves. They actually just like scrape it from the individual, I guess, like content publishers. And so I think in the US, like there's much more of a feeling of like, hey, like how do you monetize when it's really hard to get people to pay? And also there are like these like alternatives that they could use to not pay.
Was the traffic mostly US or was it more spread out than that?
It was pretty spread out, but like probably like anywhere from 60 to 80% was US based. So we had a lot of Canadian readers, and we also had a lot of Indonesian readers as well.
I would think like the whole English speaking world potentially would be your readers. Did you ever do translation the other direction, like English to Chinese or other languages?
Yeah, so going back to the point about like readers, I think the main reason why was because most of the translators were based in the US. And so that meant that like the English that we use might be like a little bit different than people in like Australia or like Britain. And the other part of this was like we actually saw like a really big market in the East Asian countries, like Philippines, Indonesia, Vietnam. And I think that's where the parent company is currently focused on. But I think the reason why they were able to find a lot of success there was just simply because of the fact that like the content was so similar to what they had been exposed to previously. And so so I think those two are probably why like the US was the biggest, and like also since I was based in the US, it like also made a lot of sense. And with regards to your other question, which was translating from English to Chinese. We actually did try that a little bit, not too much, but we did try that with a couple of our original novels. And I think the results were quite disappointing, just because like there's already so much content out there in China itself with regards to like the like 3 or 4 major publishers. It's already like a full-blown economy. People have been doing this as their living for a long time. And so I don't think our ecosystem was, I guess, like established enough to produce the right kind of content to succeed in that sort of environment.
Makes sense. Mukhtar in the live chat was wondering if you could circle back a bit on growth and how you got all of that traffic, just particularly like what channels you used.
Yeah, so I think ultimately it was the product that like led to most of our growth. So going back to like what Gravity did, we basically translated these like novels, but like these weren't like your traditional novels that only have like maybe like 20 to 30 chapters and like 10,000 words, or sorry, 100,000 words. Like these were novels that had maybe 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 chapters even. Mm-hmm. Each chapter with about 2,000 words. And so now you have what, like anywhere from like 2 to 6 million words per novel. And so when that happens, right, like say like if the hook was good enough, it's like probably like roughly 100 chapters in, like you would be pretty drawn to the story. And you still had like maybe, let's say like 1,900 chapters left. And so like you would keep coming back simply because the story wasn't done yet. It's like most, I guess, like stories that we read in the book format, like they would be done by like our chapter 50, but like we were what, like roughly 20x bigger. So I think that was the first and probably the biggest piece. Like once a user like read past, I don't know, like chapter 25, they would pretty much be hooked, and like they just wouldn't churn. It'd be like really small amounts of churn. And so that meant that like as we grew, like the only thing that we needed to maintain was the quality of our chapters or like our translations, and also be the quantity at which we outputted. And so that was, I think, the first piece. And then the second piece was just like, I think we also hit upon a really important, for lack of a better word, need, where people would want to maybe like spend like the next like 5-10 minutes in some sort of like quick thing that would make them happy or like enjoy themselves, so like TikTok or like YouTube. But like we were the written version of that, right? Like you could jump in, read a chapter, and then be done, and then not have to really think about it again until you did your next chapter. And so that meant that like for people who just joined us or like found us online, like they could maybe read 2 or 3 chapters, then boom, they, I guess, like get a little bit more hooked, and then they just like read, and then keep on reading, and then slowly they would get more and more hooked until they became like a very committed user or like reader to us. And then the third part was simply that there wasn't any content like this elsewhere at the moment. So I think when we look at fiction, I think there is this like very clear gap between what I would call young adult, which is probably targeted more towards the early teens, and then like fiction in the sense of like, I don't know, let's say like something more adult based. So like that would be like anywhere from like 30 onwards, where it's a little bit more mature, a little bit more like thought provoking. And so I think what we did was we had this niche between, I think, like roughly 15 to 25, where there just wasn't the right type of content for them. And we filled that niche where it was still like these like more like fantasy superhero stories, but then they also had a little bit of element of deeper society as well. So like one thing I can think of is like you had, I guess, like these like tropes where like the the main character would be looked down upon, and it became very real. Whereas like uh, they got looked down upon because of wealth, because of, I guess, like race even. And so like it's like it was a bit more mature than like this, like, oh, like, hey, this hero went on this journey to become great. It became a little bit more deep. Yeah.
So you'd hook people in,
um
they would stay, and you had really high
yeah.
retention. Was there any like
Mhm.
SEO benefit to having that many just like words on your website?
Yeah, I think there definitely was. So like for a very long time we were basically putting like chapters on like plain HTML, like barely any CSS or JavaScript. So, and like we certainly didn't do any tags or whatnot. And so like it was basically just like a bunch of words on a page that linked to other pages with a lot of words on them. And so I think that helped us, I guess, like in the sense of like we were very clean and like minimalistic. But in terms of like SEO, like we really never prioritize that or even like dug very heavily into that until much later. And like even when we did, it was kind of a like back burner focus. And I think that's something that's, I think, a little bit different than like most other companies or most other places. And I think the main reason for that was just because of the fact that we had such a big audience already, and like word of mouth was such a big channel. And so our main growth levers were simply to how can we I guess, encourage our current readers to share what they're reading with their friends. And I think that was very drastically different than like, oh, like let's optimize our SEO so someone searching can like find us.
What did you do to encourage sharing?
Yeah, so I think we did a lot of different things, whether it's like bringing on new novels, I guess like doing events and whatnot. I think at the end of the day, there was just really these two cornerstone metrics: quality and quantity, where you just had the best novel, best translations, most gripping story that was translated well, so like no like errors in grammar, punctuation, stuff like that. And then in terms of quantity, it was just like how many chapters of this one novel could you produce, right? So I think this meant that like throughput was also dependent on each novel, where if you had, let's say, 10 novels and you did one chapter a week on each of them, it would have much less of an impact than one novel with 10 chapters out. So yeah.
Once you were at Tencent, how did they incentivize you to keep working as many hours as you did? Were you still participating in the upside of Gravity in some way, or was it like a lockup period?
Yeah. So there was both an earnout and also I kept a percentage of Gravity itself. And then there were some like other bonuses involved. I think the main reason why I worked still so hard for so long was simply because I really enjoyed doing what I did. I really like enjoyed reading like since I was a kid, and I really did enjoy like these novels that we were translating. So like I think in my free time, right, like it's like take a break from Gravity. I would basically just go on to like my parent company's website and just read more. And so I think it was probably a mixture of like passion and just like the incentive structure that like made me like work as hard as I did past the acquisition.
So when your earnout ended, is that when you decided to leave, or what was the motivation for ultimately leaving after a couple of years?
Yeah, so I think it was a bit of both. Definitely when my earnout ended, it was like a sense of, I don't know, relief.
Mm.
Although it did end at the end of 2017 and left at the start of 2019. I think the other part was uh, thinking that I wanted to do something other than publishing for the rest of my life. And I think that was also like why I sold the company. It was like, hey, like I don't want to be uh, working in this like sort of very niche publishing for like the next 10, 20 years. And when I came to that realization, like that's why like ultimately decided, hey, like I'm gonna sell instead of take investment or otherwise. And so like I think starting from the moment that I sold, I knew I wanted to like leave at some point. And I think that the other piece here was thinking about, hey, like I was what like I was 18 when I sold it, and then I was 20 when yeah. So I was 20 when I decided to leave. And like at that point, I was like, hey, like so I'm a 20-year-old with no college degree. I did sell my company, but like what's next for me? Right? Like I still have like well, like maybe 40, 60 years of my life left. And when I thought of it like that, it made the decision quite clear. Like, hey, I should go back to school. I should think about like what I want to do next, what I'm passionate about next. And so I think that's what ultimately made me leave.
I guess one last question about GravityTales from the chat. It says, you're clearly very passionate about GravityTales. What was it about it that made you feel it had really good business foundations versus anything else? I'd also be curious now, as an older, wiser Richard, maybe in hindsight, what your takeaways are from building GravityTales.
Yeah. So to answer Ahmed's question, the wait, can you repeat the first part again?
So he says, what was it about GravityTales at the time that made you feel like it had this business potential?
Yeah. So honestly, I don't know if I could tell you if there was like this like one specific thing. I think the first part in a long series of events was when I saw my first donation dollars come in. And I remember like I think I like opened it up on like I like set up my like PayPal account, I think under my dad's name because I wasn't 18 yet at the time. And then like I think this was back when I was still on swim team. And I was swam all through high school. And so I woke up really early each day, like around 4 a.m., 5 a.m. And I remember setting it up at like probably 6 p.m. and then waking up at 4 a.m. the next day. And like the moment I looked at my phone, I was like, you have $20 in donations, you have $40 in donations, you have like $100 in donations. I was like, what just happened here, right? I think like that moment was really magical, where the first day I set it up, I got like that much money, and like that was holy shit to me. And I think the next step that like made me think like, hey, like this could be a business was when I realized, hey, like CPM ads paid out at about like anywhere from like 0.5 to $1 per 1,000 impressions, if not more. I mean, like video ads on like YouTube maybe pay around like $8 to $10, but for like a static banner based ad like my website, like it pay maybe like the upward max was like probably $1 or so. And so like I saw, hey, like I have roughly 500,000 of page views a day. If I had, let's say, $1 per 1,000 page views, that means that I could be making anywhere from like 500 to like 600 a day. Multiply that by 30, that gets me to what, like around 15,000. Multiply that by 12, and now you're at what, like
close to 200.
180K? Yeah. And that was when I was like, holy shit, like that's quite a bit of money
Yeah.
right there. Um, and so I think that was the second point. But I think what ultimately, I guess, like made me successful, or like, I guess, made me fare better than the others, was just the fact that like I was somebody who, given a passion, could just keep working at it and like really not feel that tired for a very long time. And
Mm.
so, like back when I started, like there were probably like roughly 10 to 12 different translators. And like as we grew, right, like there became more translators overall. But when I look back and I like think about, like, I guess like all the translators that were like still working for like 2 years or more,
Mhm.
like the number is like probably like less, like around five or six, like back around the time I left, right? And so I think that was the other piece where you just kept on working on things and you just kept on trying things, right? It's like I didn't make my first dollar until like probably 3 4 months after I had been like working at this like 2 hours a day and like not spending any weekends for myself. And so I think that was the other part where it was just like, this is something that I'm passionate about. This is something I enjoy, and this can be something like that makes me money. And so I think that like the intersection of the two really helped me, I guess, like grow to like where it was when I sold it.
Mhm.
Um, the other piece, as like an older, wiser Richard, I think there's definitely like probably like a binder full of like things that I could have done differently, probably more even.
Mhm.
Like I definitely had like some very big failures, whether it was with contracts or whatnot. But I think at the end of the day, nobody starts off at like, let's say, 100%.
Mhm.
And so I think when I look back at like what my mistakes are, really they help reflect, I guess, like what I should not be doing in the future. And so I think if I had to go back in time and do it again as like me who has had all this knowledge, I probably would have not done any of what I did. Like at least I would say like 60 to like 70% of the things I did, I would do much differently. But I think that, yeah, it's just like it's water under the bridge. It's just unavoidable.
What did your parents think about all this? Did they know what you were up to?
Yeah, so I actually kept it under wraps for a really long time because I just didn't think that like anybody would want to know about this, like touch this.
Mm.
It was more like my guilty pleasure, for lack of a better word. And so I think I told my parents when I started making money, which was the donations, and they were, I think, on the edge of being supportive because uh, so I really started becoming a bad student when I started doing gravity, where grades matter a lot less to me. And so I think that definitely did hurt my college prospects.
Mhm.
Where, like, I think my second semester junior year, it was like a 3.0 GPA, which is still not bad, but like compared to what I had before, like my GPA basically went from like this
Mhm.
and tanked. And so, so I think that was like a big piece about, like, I guess, like how they felt about what I was doing. They saw my grades and they were like, "Holy shit!"
Mm.
And so, yeah, I don't think like either of them were really supportive in the sense like, "Hey, like, Richard, you should follow your dreams," but like they also never really stopped me from like doing what I was doing.
Mhm.
They were just like, "Hey, like this is your time. You get to decide how you do it, as long as like your grades don't like take a further nosedive."
Mm.
Although they did, and like they still like gave me more leeway each time
Mm.
until the end of high school, where they were just like, "Okay, well, it's too late now.
Mhm.
But yeah, like I think they gave me a lot of room to just explore what I wanted to do and just like try different things, which I'm like really grateful for. And like once it got sold, or like I guess like starting from I guess like when I was starting to enter in like the talks, like they became a lot more supportive in the sense that they like helped me find like lawyers and whatnot. And so, like I think th- throughout my whole process, they've definitely been on like the much more positive side. Although I think at the very start they were quite against it, just
Mhm.
given the fact that like my grades were just taking a nosedive.
What was their reaction like when you first revealed it? Did they realize how many people were using your site?
I I honestly don't remember when I like the exact reactions when I told them.
Mm.
I think the main thing was when I had to set up a bank account. And like this is something that I remember because it was a really, really big hassle trying to set that up as somebody who was underage.
Mm.
And so I think it was like a joint account under my dad and my mom's name. And they were like, why are you setting this account up again? And like I told them and I was like, hey, like look at my PayPal. I have this much money in it. And they were
Mm.
like, okay, you know what? Yeah, yeah, it makes a lot more sense now. And yeah, I think that's honestly like the most vivid memory that I have of that experience. Honestly, I just don't remember what happened when I first told them about it. I think they're just like, "Oh, cool," and then they moved on.
Did your age present any other challenges as far as like signing contracts with other people and things of that nature?
Yeah, I think my age definitely provided like a really big detriment, whether it was back when I was doing the contracts with like other translators,
Mm-hmm.
convincing them to join me and whatnot. But I think the other part of like being really young was like I just had so much more time and like I had so much more focus. And so like I could do these things like other people would have quit a long time ago or like stopped trying as hard. I think that like from the outside world looking in, it was definitely a huge detriment. But from my own perspective, I think it was actually a really great thing. So like if you told me like today, like, hey, you're gonna have to translate this one book that has like 10 million Chinese characters and you're gonna do it for 3 months without pay, I'd be like, what the fuck?
Mm.
But at the time it was just like, oh hey, like I mean I'm not gonna be making money with my time either. So
Mm-hmm.
like why not just try to do this and see where it goes.
Ahmed has a good follow-up question here, which is like, say you were to go back in time and start over, what would you do differently, or what would you have done differently?
Yeah, I think I asked that of myself a lot, especially the days after I left Gravity, thinking about like, hey, like what could I have done differently? What could I have done better? And I think the honest answer was if there was one event that like really changed things, was that I think I should have dropped out of school the moment I started Gravity
Mm.
and actually taken like a full-time position somewhere else. So like whether it was like being, I don't know, a clerk or like I don't know, a intern at some startup. I think the biggest thing that I guess like kept me back was just like the lack of experience and just the lack of understanding of how the world really functioned in like a non-school environment.
Mm.
And so I think that would probably be the biggest thing that I would change. Like if I could somehow like whisper into like my ear back in the day. But if I were to go back like today and like redo everything, um, honestly, there are like so many different things that I would do differently. But I think above all else, I think I would have been a lot more aggressive. So I didn't
Mm.
really bring on my other translators until like I think 5, 6 months
Mm.
after I started. I didn't really bring on other novels until what, like a year after I started. I didn't really think that this would be a business until like a year and a half or even 2 years after I started. So like the I guess like deltas and all this time was like basically a lot of missed and lost opportunity. And I think that if I could go back again, I'd just like try to make things as fast as possible and like do things a lot better.
I feel like that would have been a much harder sell to your parents. Let me drop out of high school
Yeah,
entirely and focus on this.
for sure, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I think like even to this day, right? Like my parents really wanted me to go to an Ivy League, and yeah, like I think at least a part of like why I didn't make the cut was because of gravity and like how much time that was sucking up. And like at the time, like it kind of didn't really make sense after my SATs because it was like what, like making like $500 like a month, maybe 1,000, and like it just wasn't a big thing. It wasn't very impactful, and like at the time, you couldn't really predict that it would grow to become as big as it did. And so when you look at like the present value, like it just didn't make sense.
I think that's kind of an indictment of the like Ivy League administration, like admission system,
Maybe,
right?
yeah,
If
yeah.
if a kid can build this like basically in his bedroom, like maybe the GPA isn't the most important factor.
I mean, I think at the time when I was applying, like gravity also wasn't this like huge thing either. So
Mm,
it was like a middling achievement, if even that.
mm.
And I think just the fact that I could like keep on pushing forward, keep on persevering after all of this, I think that's ultimately what made it successful.
Well, I guess when it comes time to make your parents happy, there's always grad school, right?
Yes, exactly.
Let's go forward in time a little bit. I guess left gravity, you've gone back to school. Now Scale
Hmm.
AI comes knocking, and you drop out again.
Yeah.
So how did that
Um,
happen? And why
yeah.
did you make the
So
jump?
yeah. So scale was really interesting because I think it was ultimately just like a big mix up that like I ended up going there. So the first part was like I actually applied for this like internship role of like under the name technical product manager.
Mm-hmm.
So like I've always been someone like who is a bit more technical, but also like somebody who also I guess like does a lot of like business experience. So I didn't really want to become like a software engineer.
Mm-hmm.
So in between the time that I applied and I got my I guess like response, that role actually got taken down, and everybody in that role actually got like I guess like transitioned to this I guess like a new role called a product operations manager.
Can you just real
And so
quickly explain what Scale AI is for people that don't know, just provide some
yeah.
context?
So basically like Scale AI labels data, and so if you think about machine learning, you have a lot of like different attributes, and then you have like a end label. And so what Scale does is like it guarantees like 99.5% accuracy on the labels through using human in the loop. And so that means like somebody like would I guess like label, hey, like this part of an image is a cat, this part of an image is a bush, this part of an image is a tree, and whatnot. And so like that would be how you could guarantee this accuracy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's pretty much like in a nutshell what Scale does, although they focus a lot more on lidar based data, which is mainly used for self-driving cars as well as like other interesting applications.
How big were they at the
Yeah,
time when you were doing this sort of internship?
yeah. So they had just raised their Series B, yeah, and valued at roughly 100 million. And soon after I joined, they raised their Series C, and I think they're also likely raising their Series D at this point.
Cool.
Valuation delta is roughly 30x.
So you join, they delete your role, and you're into this new thing. What happened next?
Yeah. So between when I applied and when I joined, basically, I think they thought that I was applying to be there full time when I really wanted just like a 3 month
Mm.
internship. And so basically, they told me, hey, like your offer will stand unchanged. Like if you want to become an intern, you can just leave after 3 months, and like that'll be it. And uh, so I guess I really joined Scale as a full time employee, even though I was thinking that I would only stay there for about 3 months. Um, and yeah, I think Scale was really interesting in that like it was a very, very fast growing startup. Like we were basically like in hypergrowth everywhere you saw. Like it was more a bandwidth problem than a actual like, hey, like we need to find more customers, like do something else problem. It was just simply like there were so many problems that we just didn't have enough time to solve them. And like if we did, then we could be growing even faster, which would, I guess, also lead to more problems, which I mean, it's like catch 22 there. But yeah, so as a product ops manager, basically like I was part of this new team called supply ops, which basically handled everything supply related. So like that would be all of our human labelers. And more specifically, I worked in the sales part of that team. So basically, I worked with a lot of like salespeople. I worked a lot with the customer success / like customer operations people to just like get these deals done, such as like if they wanted to like first sign a contract with us, they would want to, I guess, like have a POC, proof of concept, or just like some data that we label that shows them, hey, like we have this level of quality and precision. And so that was, I think, the main piece. I also worked a lot with like the existing, I guess, like ramps, which were, I guess, like these existing customers, and at some point they had some sort of quality issue or some other issue, and like I worked to like solve those fires. Yeah, so I think that explains my role and like my time at like Scale in a quick nutshell. Yeah.
How long did you end up staying there?
Yeah, so I ended up staying about 7 months, 8 months almost. And yeah, so I think one of the things at Scale was everybody was very ambitious, and you got very, I guess, like motivated in that environment to like try to do something new. And I think that when I first joined Scale, I thought, hey, like I really just want to come here to learn about like AI and ML, and then go back to school, and then see where my life takes me from there. By the time I was like 2-3 months at Scale, like my thoughts were, hey, I want to do a new company now. I don't want to go back to school ever again. And I think yeah, so I got caught up in that, like it's like fever. And then like when I left Scale, I thought, hey, like let me try doing something new.
So why did you end up leaving after 7 months, after kind of drinking the Kool-Aid after 3 months?
Yeah, I think the main thing was just like, hey, I wanted to do something new, something different, something where I could be building something from the ground up.
Is that when?
Yeah,
is that what brings us to ShineWith, or was there some other things in between there?
There was a couple of things in between. Like I thought, hey, like edtech was going to be the next wave. I had also gone back to China very recently, so I actually got back in January, back when COVID was barely beginning, and actually gotten sick in China, although that was for, I think, food poisoning. Not a very pleasant experience, and like it almost like jeopardized me coming back here, because like they were like, hey, what if he has COVID? Right. So thankfully I was, and hopefully still am, COVID free. And then I came back, and I guess that was a point where I was like, hey, like let me try doing something new. And so like that was first, like I think my first thought was like, hey, I want to do something education related, because that was always something that I had in the back of my mind. And then also at scale, I worked a little bit on the, I guess, like incentive problem, where how could you educate people to like do well, but then also like incentivize them to want to be educated.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought, hey, like I can use this experience, and like maybe I can start to think about like, hey, like what sort of thing that I want to do, I guess, like in terms of the ed tech space. Um, yeah, and then that month, I guess, like for the month of February, I called up a lot of different people. I like read a lot of different books, and the end answer for me was, holy shit, this does not sound like a space that I want to be in. um, and I think like a lot has changed with COVID, and like I think today when we look at it like now, it seems like it's like a much nicer space in terms of like there's a lot less bureaucracy and a lot more, I guess, like blue ocean where
Mm.
like companies can sell much more easily into. Whereas like at the time when I first like thought about it, and I heard about like I guess like how long it takes to like really sell to these like universities or high schools, it was like holy shit. And then the other part was like you weren't really judged on like your performance, you were really judged on like the features that you had. So like
Mm.
even if you had like it's like the world's best video video conferencing like Zoom,
Mm-hmm.
um like previous to COVID, like Zoom didn't really sell that well to like teachers, because they always had this like random application somewhere that had this one feature that like basically that was your whole product. And because it had that one feature, they were like, yeah, we're good on this,
Right.
even though they really weren't. And I think that that was the other piece there, which I guess like really made me think about like, hey, maybe we shouldn't, or like maybe I shouldn't pursue this.
Mm-hmm.
And so that brings us to like ShineWith, where yeah, like I worked on for like the past like 8 months or so.
So what is ShineWith?
Yeah, so ShineWith, I guess the big and more mighty description is like we're basically reinventing the infrastructure in which creators get their raw materials. So that might be like gemstones, it might also be like steel or silver or gold and whatnot. Although we really just focused mainly on gemstones, and in particular turquoise.
So I think a lot of people are probably thinking that's like a pretty big departure from everything you've done before, publishing, technology. How do you get involved with ShineWith?
Yeah, so I think so it was mainly my co-founder who I guess like knew a lot about turquoise, and who has like had this like very deep expertise there. And I actually had met her in SF, and I realized, hey, like this is a very nice and niche opportunity. Although I think at the time I was still at scale, and I wasn't really thinking about, hey, like maybe like I could pursue this. And so I think at the end of like February, like I was really when I was thinking about like, hey, like COVID's starting to come here. What's like something that's like very in-person heavy, and something that's probably going to be changing rel- relatively soon.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought, hey, like maybe this could be trade shows, because those are like very heavily in person, and also like very much like something that probably was not going to be happening with COVID happening.
Mm-hmm.
And so for trade shows, I think there's a lot of different varieties. Um, the most famous one I think that we can all think of is like the gun trade shows. Although I think as a proportion of overall trade show market, they're quite small. And so I think one of the things was like raw materials, where it was like gemstones and whatnot. And like I never knew that like how hard it would be to I guess like get raw materials if you were I guess like someone who's sold on Etsy or whatnot, and like didn't have like a huge amount of traffic. It was basically you would fly to these trade shows once a year. buy basically all of your stones for the whole year, and then fly back and hope they didn't crack or like break afterwards, because there really was no refund or return policy. And so so like that's what me and my co-founder, I guess, like set out to change. Basically, it was kind of like e-commerce in a box, where we would talk with the suppliers, they would consign their stones to us, and then we would sell it out at like a huge markup. So like if say the stones were consigned to us at like roughly $2 a carat, we'd sell it at maybe $10 a carat, and then probably pocket maybe 70 to like 80% of that. And so it was like extremely high margin. It was also like this like a problem that just hadn't been thought of before. And yeah.
So how did you find all of these suppliers if like the trade shows were closed where maybe you would normally go to make contacts?
Yeah. So my co-founder actually knew quite a few of them, and then from there on out, most of these suppliers had a lot more inventory than I guess like they could move at the time, because simply trade shows were, I guess, like out. And so like in these trade shows, they would like lug tons and tons of these stones to each trade show, and then like try to sell it as much as possible. So for us, it really wasn't the quantity of suppliers, but rather just like the quality of them. Because simply like if we talk with a supplier that was big enough, like they might have like maybe like a millions, like more than that, of stones just like sitting in a warehouse somewhere that they just couldn't move.
So they were looking for any way to sell these stones, and kind of came
exactly
with a solution in a box for them. And then when it came to the demand side, how did you find your first customers, and how did you grow?
Yeah, so we started off with Instagram, and like my co-founder had an account that had maybe like roughly 15,000 followers. And so like we have always had like, I guess, like that demand. It just wasn't fully tapped into, like utilized. And so when we started the website in like March maybe, like we got maybe like 1K in sales for the whole month. And then by the time like last month, or even like back in August, we were doing like 55K a month in terms of revenue.
So how do you go from 1K a month in your first month to 50K like 6 months later?
I think it's still the same formula as back when I was working at Gravity, like quality plus quantity. Like quality in the sense that like, hey, like you had the, say, best description, so you had the weight, the size, the matrix, the color, everything about the stone described, and then you had like really good pictures, and also you just had like pretty good stones. So that was the first piece, and then the other piece was quantity, where basically like most of the other sellers were like maybe like in their like 60s, 65 maybe, and these were people who were rather technology illiterate. And so for us, really what we had to do was simply push out more stones than anybody else, which thankfully wasn't that hard. And so yeah, like if we look at like our like online competitors, like most of them who I guess like deal with freeform, like they can maybe push out like 1 or 2, maybe 3K of inventory a week. We were maybe doing 15, 20K worth. And by push out, I mean list.
Are you selling these like individual stones, individual gems, or is it like per kilogram? How are people purchasing?
Yeah, so it's per stone based. I mean, like there are like small batches of like maybe 2, 3, 4, up to 10 if they're really small. But for most of them, it was just each stone individually, which is like where we get our margin from.
How did you handle the logistics of fulfillment, especially?
Yeah, so that was mostly my co-founder. Like at the start, it was basically her apartment, And then slowly we built out like both a Philippines and also a China-based team
Mm.
where they could either handle the customer service, or like the sorting and like the I guess like overall processing of all the stones coming in.
So all that overseas logistics, like fulfillment, was set up remotely, I guess, because we're still in pandemic.
Yeah.
How do you do that? How do you set up something so physical when you can't like physically be there?
I think that end piece there is just trust. Like you just have to trust the people that like you find and then you hire, and like without that layer of trust, like a lot of this is really hard, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I think the one thing that like I think we take for granted today is say like we hire a new employee and like they work in the same office as us. Like we don't really think about it when we give them like let's say like all of the files. Whereas like let's say like that employee was like based in I don't know like China or something else. Then we start thinking about like hey, like do we really want to send this over? Simply because like there's this like geographical distance, which I guess like
Mm.
dilutes trust a lot. And I think that's just like the piece there where it's just like how like what's the right balance of trust and like how much I guess like rope can you give them if you were to like say hire them. So I think one more concrete example would just be like hey like let's give them a goal and then let's just see them like see how they iterate, see where they go, and then like let's just like support them rather than tell them what to do.
Mm.
And I think that's been like that's like what's really has like driven me, whether it was Gravity or uh, Scale or now ShineWith. It was just about like let's find the maximum value of trust. Let's give it to them, and then let's just have them move on from there, if that makes sense.
We've been speaking a bit in the past tense in terms of ShineWith. Is that are you still with them? Are you still like planning to grow together?
Yeah, so I think the answer to that is no. I think the thing that I think I really made a mistake on this time was
Mm.
just simply not following what I was passionate about. And I think at the end of the day, like selling stones is not exactly something that like I'm super passionate about. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's something that I like wake up in the morning and I'm thinking, oh my God, like today's a great day. And so yeah, so I like actually left roughly like 2 3 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, yeah, like started thinking about leaving 2 3 weeks ago, and like we made it official last week.
Mm. And so what's next? I guess is the question. What do you think will drive you to? What are you pursuing with more passion, or what do you hope to accomplish?
Yeah, so the answer to that is, or like the short answer is, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
The the reason being is like I really haven't really thought about like hey like what makes me passionate up until like this point, because like whether it was Scale or ShineWith, it just seemed like the right next step for me at the time. And like I don't think I've ever like had the same amount of passion for either of them as I did back when I was running Gravity.
Mm.
And so I think the first step is going to be like a process of just exploring things and like seeing hey like what really makes me passionate, like what makes me want to get up out of bed in the morning and just like belt, belt these things out and like work on this. I think the biggest comparison I can give you is like I mentioned like hey like what makes me wake up in the morning, and the reason for that is like how early I wake up usually is directly proportional to like how much like how excited I am about the day.
Mm.
So like back when I was doing Gravity, I would wake up at 6 or so every morning. Um, it's been a while since I woke up before 9.
Gotcha.
So yeah, so I think that's the first step where I have to figure out, hey, like what really makes me excited.
Hmm.
The other part here is, I guess, what am I like? What do I want to do for like the next 5 to 10 years? And I think that I guess like goes along the side of, hey, like what really makes you excited. But I think the other part here is like, what is opportunity big enough that I would spend like the next 5, 10 years working on? And I don't have an answer for that yet. I mean, there's a lot of ideas I'm playing around with, but none that have like really stood out to me yet.
Ahmed asks in the chat, he says he has all these ideas and he gets caught in the loop of shiny object syndromes, chasing the new thing. How do you find and validate your startup ideas before committing fully to them?
Yeah, so I think the first step is if I can write it down, at least it's something worth pursuing. So like uh, the first step whenever I have like a good like an idea is like I'll write it down. Like I don't mean like, oh, like I'll write down here like I want to do this, but rather like a full business plan. Although it's not like a full formal one, it's more like, hey, like what's the problem? What's the end goal solution? If I were to solve this, like what would be like the first, second, third thing that I would do? So like, uh, let me actually pull up one of them and then give you an example. Give me 1 second. Um, okay. Um, yeah. So let's. Okay. So like this isn't like a fully fleshed out startup idea, but I think this is like a really good I, idea for I guess like walking you through how I think. So I think the main problem here, right, like is about trust, where like whether it's because of politics or otherwise, like really it's extremely hard to establish the right level of trust in today's society. And so, what would be like the end solution, right? So I think the first step is to really think about, hey, like how can we have some sort of medium that requires a fair amount of trust, and how can we solve that? So one example could be, hey, like uh, the secondhand movie ticket market, where like people need a lot of trust, like be buying these like tickets.
Mm-hmm.
And so now what you have is like this like really big problem, and then you've now focused it down to like this like very small, I guess, like sub problem. And then from there you start thinking like, okay, what is the solution gonna take form into? So like that could either be like, hey, like you could build like a escrow account, or like a escrow service for like the tickets. You could also look to, I guess, like start to build like profiles on people, and like see like what is the trustworthiness of each person in terms of like selling movie tickets and whatnot. And you start from that point, and like you see, okay, like so now that like I have quote unquote solved this like movie ticket problem, let me move on to like I guess like the bigger problem here, where it's going to be about maybe building trust in terms of small transactions. So that might mean like anything on Craigslist or whatnot, where you don't have this like human to human element, where you guys like see each other, and like you give him cash when he gives you the item. And so instead you have this like maybe like online element where you have to, I guess, like trust the pictures and whatnot. And so like you basically build this up from this like small point, but you have your end goal in mind of like, hey, like how can I build better, more trust in people? So I don't think like that like answered your question exactly with regards to like, hey, like what do you do when you have a lot of different like shiny objects? But I think the thing that I noticed for me personally is like when I have a lot of shiny objects that I'm like seeing and like thinking about, usually they have some sort of theme that like they center around, whether it's like this like really big problem or like really this like thing that like I like saw like a couple days ago and like made me think more about it. And so I start from that point where it's like, okay, like how can I classify all of these like shiny objects under one roof? And then once I have that one roof, I can start thinking about like, hey, like what is the thing that I really, really want to work on first and see if it works out. And then from there, you can, I guess, like build a startup or like think about like how you would want to build a startup.
Is that the process you followed when it came to like ShineWith?
Yeah. So I think the main thing that like I was thinking about was actually after my trip to China, I was thinking like, hey, like things are going to be very online for a long time. So like, so I went back to China to like visit family, and so I stayed with my mom's side grandmother for like a week or so, and then I went to visit my dad's side of the family. And then when I went back to Shanghai to like leave, the night before, I was planning on staying with my grandmother, and her building actually locked down entirely. And so I think when I saw that, I was like, holy shit, like where the heck am I gonna sleep? And so thankfully I have other relatives in Shanghai, but like they weren't really expecting me to like come over. And so it was like a kind of like awkward process. Like that got me thinking about like, hey, like so like if this is going to get bigger, like what are things that are going to be impacted, right? And I think that like education was one of them, and then like the other part, like before ShineWith, I was thinking about like, hey, like what about like in-person like instruction, such as like swimming pools or like running a track or soccer field, right? Like those things are all going to probably shut down. Like, and like what is the alternative that exists out there for them? And there is nothing. And so I think ShineWith was like a like sort of a like shortcut. It's like solving this like bigger problem of like how do we, I guess, like live in a remote first world. But I don't think like when I first saw like, hey, like I like things were locking down, like my first thought was definitely not, hey, like let's rethink how we sell stones online.
What was it like getting back? You're in the US now, right?
Yeah.
How was it like getting out of China and getting back here when with all of that happening?
Kind of scary, honestly. So like in my line when I was trying to come back from China, like a lot of people were talking about like how like this was like one of the last flights out of China, and that made it really really scary because it was like, okay, so if I don't get on this flight, I'm kind of stuck in China then. And so that was the main thing. The other part was, so I had a layover in Japan, and what greeted us was like these like full hazmat suit people with like the temperature guns, like the ones that like have like a short snub. Although I think at the time it was a bit longer, so it like kind of looked like a real gun, honestly. So I was like, okay, like you have these like people like pointing guns at you, and then you're like, okay, like do I walk forward or do I not at this point? Yeah, so I think those were the two like biggest moments when I was coming back. Like other than that, it was a pretty normal trip.
Yeah, pretty normal other than all of that.
Yeah. exactly.
I kind of had a similar thing. It was in Spain in March when like Italy had just
Hmm.
locked down and they were about to lock down Spain, went back to the US, and it was
Yeah.
similarly hectic, changing flights and people in scary costumes.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think the combination of things that I guess I like saw in China like made me start to think at like the back of my mind, hey, like what is like the thing that we could do here with regards to like how can we minimize the this disruption that like COVID will bring.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think yeah, like I think it's just like you have this like overarching theme at the back of your mind, whether it's like because of like recent events or just like experiences you've had in the past, like that really shapes what you think about in the future. And then like you start from that point on, and then you realize, hey, like what is the path that like, or like what is this like big thing that like really like is eating away at me, and like why is it like bringing me all these different ideas. And then you realize like, okay, it's like this is the roof, and then okay, like let's find the right pillar to like start building it, I guess.
What are some of the like general themes you're thinking about now for your next venture, the one that hopefully will take you through the next 10 years?
Yeah, I think the biggest one that I keep coming back to is more along the lines of recruiting. So I think the biggest thing that like has been in my mind ever since I sold my company was when I asked people like, or like when I asked like people who were in my parent company what their major was, none of them were like really like it, like most of the majors didn't really make sense, right? Like like there was this person who majored in psychology that was like working as a PM.
Mm-hmm.
There was this other person that like also majored in Chinese that was now working as a software engineer. There was this person that like majored in I don't know, physics that was now working as a PM. And like it was kind of jarring to like see how mismatched like the skills were, right? Like it was like you spend 4 years of your life learning about like all of the like Chinese like symbols, like dialects, and then now really what you're doing is coding. It's like kind of different. And so I think that was like the starting point. And like I've been like thinking a lot about like, hey, like there's probably a lot of talent and time wasted because of just like improper job matching. Like if say like I wanted to find a job, but like I could maybe look up to like 200, 300 different jobs, but then like that would be like the extent of my search because simply like I don't have enough time to like explore every single opportunity. And like there might be like a better fit for me somewhere else,
Mm-hmm.
but I just wouldn't know where it is, what it is, and how should I apply. And so I think that's, I think, the like thing that I want to think about, where how can we, I guess, like utilize and like leverage more talent. And like those are like yes, like that's like my first thought. My other thought right now is like I think I'm pretty decent at like building small businesses from the ground up. So like doing things bootstraps. So like Gravity didn't take a sign of funding until it got bought out.
Mm-hmm.
ShineWith didn't take on debt or any investments, and we were always pretty much profitable as we grew roughly 10x.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's a thing here where like I have this skill set. I don't think I want to be limited to like one specific industry anymore. So like maybe like I don't know, like operating like a bunch of different smaller companies like at once, sort of like a firm. Another thought that I had, and this goes back to like more venture based, is uh, there's a lot of different ways that I guess like your attention is being captured today.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I believed in right after I left Gravity, and I still really truly believe in, is that one day, like, we'll probably be mostly captivated by like a small group of people. And like, I think that that's already starting to happen right now. Whether it's like we have our favorite YouTuber, Twitter celebrity, and whatnot. But even with that, I think there's more room for, I guess, like finer adjustments where like you might just be like watching somebody who has maybe 1,000 different viewers, and like he or she has a very niche interest and a niche personality that just attracts you. And that's more of just like an overarching thought and like a direction I think the future will hold into, and like not so much as a like, hey, this is a new business idea, but I think that there could be some like really enduring businesses that I guess like build on top of this thesis. Yeah.
Which of those?
So yeah, so like,
or do you see any like intersections between those different themes, or is one of them kind of pulling ahead for you, like demanding more of your thinking power?
I think the first two for sure are demanding a bit more of my thinking power. Like the third one is like barely even fleshed out at this point. But I don't know if like there is one that I really want to do just yet. Like the other part that I realize is like both with ShineWith and also Scale, like I jumped into them relatively quickly, and I didn't really give myself time to think about like what I really want to do. And I guess like to put it into perspective, right? Like if we look at like my time at Gravity, really I had the chance to like pull the plug for roughly about a year before I went all in. And so like I had a year's worth of time to really think about like is this something I want to do? Is this something that I want to pursue? I don't think I'll have that luxury ever again. And so I think I want to be a little bit more cautious when I start my next thing, where it's like, hey, this is something that I for sure want, that I like for sure will be spending the next 5-10 years doing.
Because you know you're going to be you're going to be going full throttle immediately.
Yeah, that, and also I think the other part is like, I think I want to do something that like is longer term. I mean, like both Scale and ShineWith were roughly 8 months. Like I've learned a lot and I've done a lot in those 8 months, but ultimately, when I think back, I probably gained the most satisfaction working on Gravity, building it from scratch, basically. And so I think that would be my like next thing, where I start to think about like, hey, like if I was going to do this, like I want to be like fully committed from day one and not just like stop at like some point, right? And I also want to be like sure that like, hey, like this is the right choice. This is what I really want to do.
We have another question from the live chat from Mukhtar. He asks, what are your thoughts on micro Saas products?
Can you define?
So I think he means something like what you would typically see on indie hackers, like you pick a niche that you're serving with software. Maybe it's not going to be $1 billion company, but something that's like 10 to 50,000 a month, perhaps.
10 to 50,000 a month. I think that's a really nice niche. The thing that I think, like, I guess, like, my opinion on it, like, I guess, could it be more specific? Can you hear me?
It's probably a little bit delayed, but Mukhtar, if you want to put some more details in the chat, we can circle back on that. Do you have any general advice for maybe people new to business and startups? Maybe the advice you would have given to Little Rich, if you could talk to him.
Write things down. So I used to be the kid in school that would not bring paper and pencil. Like I just wouldn't have a pencil, and I would just try to memorize everything. Definitely not what I do now, and I think that like now that I don't do that, it's honestly been a lot better. And I think that the other piece here is like when you write things down, you can always like reference things back. You can always like gain a bit more insight than if you just like memorize things. Less like this doesn't just apply to I guess like your I guess like what you've I guess like learned today, but rather like also like what you're thinking about, why you made this decision and whatnot. So yeah, so I think that would be my first piece of advice. And the other piece of advice is, and like this doesn't just apply to me, but also like everybody is just do it, right? Like the I guess like procedure that I follow these days is like I first have an idea, I write it down by like saying like okay, like let's think about this problem, and then I like maybe like a week later like come back to it if I'm still like very interested and like that still inspires me. I'll basically start to like write out like a more business case for it. So like the problem, the solution, the if this was going to be my business, like how would I start, what would I do. Take another like 2 or 3 days, and then come back to it. If I'm still really excited, then maybe like it's time to actually start putting things in practice. Like that might be like, hey, like if say I was really excited about the recruiting idea, maybe it's time to talk to some current students. Maybe it's time to start building out a product that like basically says, hey, like I'll show you some jobs that you might be interested in, and just stuff like that. And so I think the core takeaway is just like think less, do more.
To circle back to Mukhtar, I think what he's getting at
Yeah.
is, do you see like an increase in successful niche businesses in general, like small companies targeting a very specific niche versus like maybe the dominance of like Google or Amazon, where that's where most of business is?
Yeah. So I think full disclaimer, right? Like I've built two very niche businesses. Like these are all like something that I guess like most people don't think about. Slash, I guess like most people don't care about. And so with that in mind, like I'm personally like a really big proponent of like niche things, and I like I think those are probably like some of the coolest opportunities. But if we think in like a more macro sense, something that's like micro SaaS, like say like it's like a very small opportunity, depending on like it's like what the complexity to like entry is, it's either something like that's going to be like a really good business, or like something that's going to be a really bad business. Like let me try to give an example. So like let's take ShineWith, right? So I think what makes us special, like what makes things work, is the fact that there is a relatively high barrier to entry to get to the scale that we're at. Like you have to understand the suppliers, you have to set up the supply chain, you have to find the right demand. Those are all things that are like relatively non-trivial. Whereas say like if you created a widget in the App Store, right? Like for let's say Shopify, or like the distribution pieces are already solved for you because it just exists within the Shopify App Store. But then that also means like if someone thinks that you have a good idea and like they can build it in like let's say 10-12 hours coding nonstop, and then they can charge less than you, that kind of sucks. And so I think that's the other piece where it's like I think a lot of these like niche things are really cool and really interesting, but ultimately what makes things different than like a project and a business is how hard is it for people to like copy what you're doing. Like with Gravity, it was really hard for people to copy even the publishers back in China who wanted to launch their US division, simply because like we had a very, very strong connection with our readers, and none of the readers would move over. And so what that meant was like they were investing maybe 5, 10, 20x more to acquire one user than we were. And that just like makes the economics so much worse for them. And like sometimes it would even like make them not want to pursue down the path of like creating a US branch, which a couple companies tried, and then they failed, and then they closed up shop for expansion into the US. But besides that, I think the other piece here is like I'm really, really bullish on, I guess, these like small projects as a way to like generate wealth. I think my experience with Gravity is that like there's probably no other way, time, or like, I guess to put it a different way, like with just the sales price of Gravity, I basically for my 4 years at Gravity, I was making at least 500K a year. And that's not including my own personal salary or like bonuses. If it wasn't for Gravity, I don't think I would have ever made anywhere near this same amount through my entire career. Like I might have like become a software engineer and then like made it into like Facebook or Google, and then like at some point in my life made that much, but it's very unlikely that I would have actually been there. And so like when we think of that, like see that, right? Like it's like really what these like niche businesses help you do is more in the lines of like social mobility, where you now have a chance to be someone who you couldn't be any other way. And I think like that's why I'm like so bullish on like why like this will still happen, like why this is something that I'm really excited about. But also like the reality is like if you can do it, and like you can do it like I guess like in a relatively small amount of time, that means someone else can do that same thing. And so I think there's this I guess like struggle there where it's like you have to do something that's like both small but also takes a non-trivial amount of time to like do well.
That feels like a really great place to end it.
Yeah,
Richard, this was awesome. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on. Thanks for everybody who's listening and for all the great questions in the chat. This stream is not going to be available afterwards. It'll get uploaded like sometime next week, so you can look out for that. Maybe share it to your friends who weren't able to make it. Rich, after we end this, do you mind just keeping this tab open for a little bit? It's going to upload in the background so that we have like the full quality audio and video later.
Sounds good. We'll do.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much for being here, and just looking forward to what you do next.
Of course. And thank you as well.